So I'm Brendan Filbert, managing partner with SalesWorks. And my area of expertise is I work with professionals that are very smart and they went to school to do something that probably didn't have anything to do with selling. And sales is something that they're not always the most comfortable with. And I show them processes to do it in a way that's fun and highly rewarding and very profitable and productive. So we're here today to hopefully give you some great ideas to add to your prospecting. Chris, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Chris Motley. I'm the director of marketing for SalesWorks, but I also have a company called Motley Creations. And what I do is I make people look good and companies look good, right? It's anywhere from fulfillment of marketing plan to managing a staff outside department of marketing and advertising and things like that. So, and today I get to be co-host.
And we're going to have a lot of fun today with that. All right, so I am going to real quickly, I'm going to go ahead and hopefully kill webcams on my side for just a moment as we dig into this, because I want to make sure that we don't have any drag on bandwidth as we get going, because we're going to be covering a lot of ground and we're going to kind of go fast as we're doing this. So as we're talking about our topic today, I want to make sure that we are, our messaging and everything that we're talking about is for the right audience that's on our call today. So if you fit any of these categories, if you are a transitioning business leader, if you are a professional service provider, an attorney, an accountant, you've been a CFO, you've been a CEO, you've been a CMO, if you are looking for opportunities to stabilize your cash flow and not be constantly chasing your next gig, that's who we're talking to today. Also, the other area that we're focusing on today, or if you have a creative profession. So in other words, if you're doing graphic design, if you're doing copywriting, if you're doing web design, if you're offering any type of freelance services, I'm going to give you a lot of information today on that you're going to find helpful in terms of selling those services and engaging with your prospects. So that is who we are talking to today. And as I mentioned, we're going to be covering a lot of ground and going kind of fast. So you're going to want to have something that you can take notes as we go through this today, because what I want to make sure that I provide for you is based on where our job market is and where the business climate is, most importantly right now. We recognize that maybe your biggest challenge is having customers that are doing a lot of delaying of projects getting started, or maybe the scope is changing and you've had to go back and restructure what those services look like. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's causing opportunities with your business to stall out. And so what I want to give you today is ideas of how you can take your services and go to a broader market. So if you've been pursuing that large corporate buyer that is now all of a sudden furloughing a lot of their staff and the people that you were working with aren't there anymore, then I want to give you access to potentially that mid-size market or small market that maybe they're an essential workforce that they desperately need your help right now, and they've got the resources in order to engage you. So I want to give you information there. I also want to give you tools to help you with reaching greater impact within your clients. So in some cases, we may have services that we go in and we kind of feel like we're that one-trick pony, that all we know how to do is shake hands or play dead, or, you know, for lack of a better term. And the thing that I want you to be thinking about is how can you reach a broader market and provide more value and touch more lives? And that's what we're going to be talking about today also, which will provide you with more viability to your business. The other things that we are going to be talking about, and make sure you hang around to the very end, is I'm going to be asking you some big questions as we're wrapping things up. And some of those big questions will help you with recognizing how you scale beyond selling your time and your knowledge in a one-on-one transaction. So make sure that you hang out until the very end. If you do have to hop off the call, then because sometimes we run a little bit long, depending on how many questions we get and how deep we dive into some different topics. So it will be on the recording as well, but we're going to have some special stuff that you are going to want to be here to participate in the conversation. Now, our objectives that we're going to dig into today, and as I've mentioned before, I want to help you not only understand what fractional services can do for your business, but I'm going to help you with recognizing a structure that can be profitable and productive for you. And then most importantly, I'm going to be talking about how to sell those services. So we're going to dive deep into a lot of really good information. And with that being said, if I'm going too fast, or if there's information that you want a little bit more context around, make sure you send us a chat so that we can address that as we get to the different spots in our presentation. But one of the things that I've learned about delivering training is if you don't ask your question when you think of it, chances are you're going to forget it. And I don't want you to forget it, because sometimes it's those nuggets that can make the most impact for you. And my goal today is to give you information that you are going to take and make money on. And this is not just something that I want you to think, oh, that's kind of a cool concept. I want you to have something you can take action with and go to work. Now, first thing that I want you to think about as you are evaluating how you sell consulting or fractional services is the very first thing that we can do for you with this approach is it can move you from selling your time or your process on a time and materials basis. So I'm going to give you just a really quick example of one of my clients that's an attorney, and he has the skill set of helping growing companies prepare and go acquire either angel investments, venture capital, or go into that Series A and Series B round of financing. Now that's pretty big, and it's pretty important for a business to have somebody that really knows the ins and outs of that. That's something that's pretty technical. That's like Silicon Valley level of service. Now, when he sells those services, if you were going to go to one of those big national firms, it'd probably cost you $150,000 or more to have someone assist you with that process. And he sells it for around $15,000 to $25,000, depending on how complicated that your offering is going to be. Now, the thing is if you look at what he does, it doesn't take him $15,000 or $25,000 worth of his time in order to do it. But there are a lot of factors that play into how his service is structured, and I'm going to get into that today. The biggest component is the value-based billing. And I want that to be one of your key takeaways today, is that when you sell fractional services, do not just think of it as your time and materials. I want you to also think about it as what upside potential do your clients experience through having you, okay? All right, now let's talk about the other area that fractional services can really play a huge part in your business and stabilizing things. Because probably when you started your business or you start thinking about building an independent consulting practice, we of course have this goal in mind of we're going to have this gradual incline that will hopefully help us be more and more successful as we're building our practice, but it's going to be something that's pretty manageable. That's what we like to think. And then we discover this reality of it's more of a, you hit these valleys and then you have to go through all of these other challenges, and then you have to think about how you navigate storms. And there are so many of these things that we would love to say there are processes to fix it, but it all comes down to how you're going to sell your time and the type of opportunities that you are going to engage with. If you want to stabilize it and have this experience, the more you can think about your business as a fractional offering and how you scale your services through a series of engagements with small and medium sized projects that can be consistent. That way you don't end up with one massive client that when it goes away, you have no income. And that's what typically happens with a lot of professionals is they go about thinking, I'm going to go land this big opportunity that looks like my former full-time job. And you may do that, but normally what you end up landing is another job. And then when that job goes away after 6 or 9 months, or maybe less, now you're stuck with these long dry spells. And we don't want that to happen. We want to have consistent income, consistent workload, so that you're not always in just this hysterical activity cycle, because that's not fun for anybody. Now, as we dive into this, what I want to do is I want to talk a bit about who would hire you. So before we dive into it, I've got a really quick question for you today. And I'm going to just ask you how many, and answer me through the chat feature on this. Do me a favor, chat me how many of you are currently offering fractional services to your clients. I'm going to take just a minute. So just give me a quick yes or no. Okay. Looks like we have a lot of folks in here that are already offering those fractional services. So you're here to probably get some other ideas about how you would expand that. And then I've got others that are probably in the beginning stages of how are you going to go about selling it, or how do you structure your current offering to fit that fractional model so that you can have that consistent business coming in from one client. So as we dig into this first question, I'm going to keep that in mind. First thing that you have to answer is, where do you fit in the life cycle of an opportunity? And this slide is kind of busy, so I'm going to let you know that we designed it this way because it serves as a worksheet. So what I want you to do is underline when you get the slide deck, or circle the areas that you are going to want to serve on the who do you serve. So we've got an individual if you are selling directly to a consumer. Maybe you're working with families. If you are targeting nonprofits, small businesses, mid-market corporate buyers, every one of those individuals is going to have a particular moment in time that creates that entry point. It could be the age of their life or their business. It could be something that they're going through with either a stage of life, or maybe it's a stage of growth, or right now, potentially, it could be dealing with a reduction in force and they're laying people off, or, there's any number of things that can be happening that create the trigger event, the particular business challenge or organizational issue. Maybe you're approaching them as staff augmentation. But what is really important that you do right now, determine where in the life cycle do you best fit. And now I'm not talking about when I'm visiting with you about the creating these opportunities and targeting who you want to work with. I don't want to know who you can work with. I want to know, who do you want to work with? And what's really important is that you recognize and go back in your career and identify those moments when you have just been so energized and excited about getting up and going to work every day. What did that business look like? What was the structure? What was the leadership like? And the more you can define those intangibles, what we call, it's not demographic information, it's psychographic. So it's more about the situation or the personality of that person that you're best going to serve. That's the important stuff that you define when you're thinking about offering fractional services, because you are going to ideally be a part of their organizational structure moving forward. You want to be that external resource that is almost a part of the team that people rely on. And it's important that you really think through this before you start pursuing the opportunities, because that will help you identify who that cast of characters is within an organization. Because what you're going to find, depending on the client that you want to serve, is that it's not as simple as there is a CEO that you're going to approach or any one particular person that you're going to sell to. Now, in the days of when I first started doing sales training, it was way back in the early 2000s. And at that point, you only talked to the CEO. If you didn't get to the CEO, you didn't have the right person at the table. And now, the way business is being done, and probably even more so based on what's happened in the last 30 days, there's a lot of this that's in flux. And it's really important that you understand the dynamic within your target prospect. So as you're getting to know what the opportunity looks like, and as you're starting to research, you have to understand not only the decision makers, but the other key stakeholders. So it may be the president, but there may also be a board that he has to answer to or she has to answer to. And there may be other structures that they're going to have to address, and that you need to be prepared to support that decision and how they're going to make it. So it's a case of, you may not be the person selling your services. You may have to be equipping others to do that on your behalf. And that's why it's important for you to think about that internal advocate, or who will be your white knights. The competitors are not so much external competitors, but internal competitors. So if what you're offering is staff augmentation, there may be people that are being laid off that you're replacing their role. There's a lot of things that you're going to be thinking about, as well as the people that you're working with in the organization. And you have to think about where you're going to fit into that team. And this is something that you do want to just think through what this might look like, because these are all going to be questions that you're going to need to ask as you move forward. Now, let me just do another quick question here. I'm going to ask you, how many of you have been selling your services for longer than a year? Let's just do a quick chat. Okay. I got some folks in here who are very experienced. And then I've got others that are just kind of getting started with this. Okay. Well, I'm going to share with you something that I learned back when I was first getting started in my sales career. And it's actually from the world of car sales. And I'm not going to tell you how to do a hard close. I'm actually going to tell you one of the tricks that can help you put selling in context in what you're doing. Because I didn't wake up one morning and say, hey, I feel like being a salesperson. Like a lot of you, and probably Chris could chime in with this as well. I found myself in sales based on, it was a life circumstance that brought me here. And I think a lot of us have that exact same experience of, we are now in something that may be familiar, may not be, may feel a little awkward. But one of the secrets that I learned when I did dive into car sales, I had a manager that told me, he said, if you can understand how they made their last purchase, then, and you follow that same process, you will be able to help them make this purchase. And now, how that equates to selling fractional services is, you have to think about how they are used to engaging resources that are similar in context to what you offer. So have they engaged someone externally before as a coach or as a mentor? Or have they gone to an outside audit or accounting firm? Are they used to hiring someone as an interim manager or consultant or supervisor to come in and navigate the project? So think about external project managers, or have they hired people or given that task internally to someone that has a talent for that? Do they rely on employees primarily, or are they very familiar with using the model of staff augmentation? So think about what they have done in the past and identify that early on when you're asking questions. And when I talk about early on, it typically happens during the first conversation that you're having with a potential client. You can discover, have you worked with someone that looks like me in the past? Or have you worked with someone on your accounting and finance? Or have you worked with an external leadership coach or marketing service? Find out what process they went through to determine that was the right solution. And pay attention to that, because we're going to be using that a little later when we talk about how you're going to structure your offer. Now, recognize, as I'm giving you exercises today, this is not going to be a mass approach. Everything that I'm giving you is a one-to-one conversation that will take place, because what you are looking for is literally that one person out of hundreds of potential clients right now. And now, to get to what that one person looks like, we're going to recommend that you dive in and have conversations, but you approach everything more as a selling one-to-one, rather than, there are a lot of, I know if you've been through like some of the different business planning processes, they'll talk about doing surveys and market research. And my market research that I'm going to give you today is more about that one-to-one interaction or one-to-one conversation. And that's what we're going to dive into now with how to sell it. So before I get into that though, let me just ask a quick question here. How many of you are pretty clear about who you want to serve in your role? And how many of you are working on figuring that out? So that's one avenue. The other question I have for you is, how many of you have been working with a target client that has gone away? So your decision makers have moved. The opportunity may not be there based on what's going on. So for instance, if you've been serving restaurant groups, that may be a target audience that just isn't there right now. Or if you're after groups that are under a lot of pressure right now, like banks or different essential works. How many, it's a case of, that's a harder audience to get to just based on workload. So if you've got, the biggest thing that I want you to be thinking about as we move forward is, when you're selling fractional services, you want diversity in your client base. So as I'm talking through the different approach you're going to make in selling these services, I want you to have a notepad handy, and I want you to jot down names, or even if it's a business name or an individual name, I want you to capture it as we're talking through on your notebook. Because as I said earlier, this information comes into your brain and then normally out just about as quickly. And these are those momentary flashes of brilliance are what can lead to your best opportunity, because that's your brain working. Your subconscious is working on your behalf. And I want you to really capture that as we move forward. So Chris, I'm going to ask you real quick, do you want to share anything based on identifying that, who do we want to sell to, before we dive into this?
I think that we have we do a lot of pie in the sky kind of things, right? And we think this is who I'd really want to sell with what to. And in my um, experience is like I had a vertical that was really good for me, which was not for profits, and I never ever would have thought that that was a correct vertical. So um, one of the things I'm big on is I prefer experience rather than daydreaming kind of thing. So be open to all opportunities, but yeah, she's correct. You need to focus, laser sharp on what you want to get, because you shotgun market, you're going to have nothing. So
Yeah, you spend a lot of money and a lot of effort. And Chris actually has a term for it that I absolutely love.
so you end up with this. I told her this when I met her years and years ago, was that I was like a dog on linoleum, right? A lot of action, a lot of movement, but just can't catch a claw. No moving forward. And he helped me to actually make progress.
So that's our visual as we move forward. We do not want to be a dog on linoleum. We want to be capturing it. We want to be capturing that traction and moving forward. Okay, so your very first exercise that I'm going to give you is I want you to interview those potential prospects. So the names and faces that come to mind during what we've talked about up to this point, this is why I want you to capture them and write them down, because I want you to approach this as a focus group of one exercise. So I want to make sure that what you're doing is you're capturing the most critical data, and that is their individual language. You don't just want to hear about if they would engage you, but why would they engage you? What specifically are they looking to address? Because what happens when you're having these one-to-one conversations is you will capture just this incredible insight that will help you with figuring out who you're going to serve moving forward. And then once you start to identify who this group is, I want you to schedule virtual coffee meetings. And those virtual coffee meetings, when you're making your list of people, and a really great exercise is to start with 5. And you pick 5 people that are in different places in their business. Maybe some of them are a little bigger, some of them are a little smaller, maybe some of them are managing teams, maybe some of them, they are the business owner or business leader. Find that diversity. And what's really important here that you think about is that you go into these meetings with a blank slate, but I want you to remember one thing. Every person that you are talking to, you are asking them to invest one of their most precious resources with you, and that is their time and also their influence. So it's so important that you really think of how you're going to add value. So prior to having that coffee meeting, I want you to spend some time on their website. Look at their recent press releases. Go to Glassdoor. Look at what their employee reviews are like. Understand if there's insight into their culture about how the leadership works or communicates, or difficulties or challenges with onboarding processes. Go look at Google reviews, look at Yelp reviews, look at all the information you can find prior to sitting down and meeting with them so that you can add value during that interview. So you're going to ask a whole lot of questions. You're going to get to know them in their business and what their focus is and what they're working on, and then think of how you can help them. And what I want you to do is I want you to go into these meetings just looking for opportunities for you to provide value. So brainstorm, talk about, have you considered, or what you might want to do, or something I've seen work for others, or in my previous role, this is what we did. And that's how you can relate your expertise. So don't go into it with a, well, why haven't you done this? Go into it more with a, what you might think about, because you want the prospect. And this is a challenge that smart people deal with. And by smart people, I work with a lot of people that have advanced degrees, PhDs, MBAs, you name it. They're attorneys, they're accountants with a lot of experience. And the thing is there may be a really big degree of what you do that is just common sense to you, but to others, it's not. And that's why they need you. So you have to make it okay for them to admit what they don't know. So make sure that when you go into these conversations, everything that you do is positioned as here's what you might think about. So it gives them ideas and lets them start brainstorming through and shifting their thinking. Because before you're going to have them on board with bringing you in as an external resource that they're going to lean on regularly, they have to be okay with letting you peek under the covers and just see where all the bad stuff is hiding. And they got to be okay with looking for the dust bunnies under the bed and not have you critical about their housekeeping. So that's something that's really important as you think about selling fractional services, is that you do think of how you can help them be okay with uncovering those problems, brainstorming through solutions, relate examples of what you've seen work, and then follow up and follow through by making connections or sharing additional resources with them. Now, one of the things that I want you to recognize about whenever you're in this initial relationship building stage of selling fractional services, it's important that you approach it as I want you to think about it like you're taking a trip. And this trip is called the buyer journey. And you're joining this prospect somewhere along the journey of when there's the conception of the issue, which is way back when they first start to recognize that they're having something going on that they don't like, all the way through their transformation at the end of it. And you're joining them somewhere along that path. So what you have to recognize along that path is that today's buyer is going to want, they want to have that confidence in knowing that you are their right solution. And even if you're responding to an RFP or information, the more they have confidence in your ability, the more likely you are to engage them in either an initial offering or an evaluation or small piece of business that would lead to selling something ongoing or fractional services. So it's really important that you solve problems along that buyer journey. And I will tell you that today's buyer is looking for you to solve at least 2 problems before they're going to be comfortable jumping in and hiring you. And I do want to share with you that one of the best ways for you to solve problems is to connect them to amazing resources. So when you're thinking about approaching your prospecting, the more you think about creating a team of amazing professionals that address these needs moving forward, the more you have other people that you can bring in to solve problems. And as they're solving problems, they're also building your credibility without you having to do the heavy lifting. And that is so important for you, because the buyer journey that I was talking to you about is typically 8 to 22 interactions with a prospect. And either it can be you reaching out and providing value, or every interaction you can also think about bringing in other resources that are solving problems and continuing to talk about you with that prospect. So that's something else I want you to just kind of shift your thinking about, so that you think of how you can leverage not only your time and effort and experience, but also your influence. Okay, now let's just take a quick minute and see, do we have any questions about that initial research conversation? prior to diving into how you may want to structure your services. And while I'm looking for chat, Chris, do you want to add anything?
I think you've covered it beautifully.
Okay. All right. So if we don't have any questions, and if you do come up with anything, just continue chatting them as we go through, because I want to dig into what we're going to be talking about are just some different structures. And I'm going to actually share an example here with you. So an example that I have that I love bragging on, one of my clients was an attorney by training, but her background, she had functioned as a COO for a very big insurance group out of New York. And that insurance group is nationally known. I'm not going to name names, but she had lots of experience with big corporations. And she had moved from a job that had paid a lot of money and had a lot of visibility, but she actually wanted to have a family. She got married and she wanted to have a life that gave her a lot more freedom and flexibility. So she did not want to go back to a 9 to 5. So as she was looking at options, what she did is she got super specific about that target audience that she most wanted to serve. And now her area, and let's talk about how you niche down in order to really expand your potential for profiling your prospects. She wanted to serve that small law firm that wanted to expand their services and also have social impact. So talk about getting narrow. It's not just she wanted to work with law firms that had 5 to 15 attorneys. She wanted to work with those small firms that were all about either community engagement or social impact or environmental. There was something that was cause related that was also attached to their mission and who they were. So what she did is she was connected, and she's located actually in Denver, Colorado. And she's very active in the community out there and networks a lot. And she went to just her list of contacts and attorneys. You know, they're a pretty close-knit group. And if you're an attorney and you reach out to another attorney, they're normally pretty happy to have a conversation with you, because attorneys, that's just one of the things about that particular profession. And what she did is she started reaching out to the practice group leaders. And her background, she had amazing influence and had been very well connected, both from her former role and then also as she moved into her new community. She'd just done a good job of meeting with a lot of people. So what she did is she went through this list of attorneys that were managing partners of firms that had between 3 and 50 attorneys. And that also, when she went through their bios, they had a lot of engagement or activity with just other nonprofits. There was something there that showed that they had a philanthropic heart. So she sat down with this group and she had a lot of conversations with them about what were they wanting to accomplish. Were they wanting to expand? Were they wanting to open additional branches? Were they wanting to expand their service offerings? So potentially they may have had a business in corporate law and they wanted to add a bankruptcy area of expertise into their practice, or work with lenders. And you know, there was just very specific strategic moves that they wanted to make. And she identified what their challenges had been in accomplishing those moves. And then what she did is, based on that interview, so she met with 5 different attorneys that were managing partners. One of them had a firm with 3 attorneys. There was one that had 10. There was one that had 25. Anyway, she met with all 5 of them. And then she came back after that meeting and did some brainstorming based on information that she had found. And what was really important, I'm going to share something with you, so make sure you're paying attention, because this part's really important. During that first meeting, when her prospect was saying, "You really understand my business. you really get me, based on the questions that she was asking. She made sure that she created that connection with them. And again, it was a lot through what I shared with you in the previous conversation, which is relate examples of have you considered or what you might think about. So she had related enough of that that her prospects were very engaged in wanting to work with her. So what she did is she said, what I'd like to do is I'm going to go back and do some brainstorming and think through ways that I can help you. And I'd like to get back together with you in a couple of weeks and talk through a couple of options that might make sense for me to help you address this, or solve this problem, or support you with this issue. So she made sure that she laid the foundation. Then she went back and she put together, she loves the book Traction. And there's a book in there, I think it's the Entrepreneur Operating System. And I know I've got someone on this call that follows that process as well. And what she did is she created 3 different service offerings. One was a strategy session where she basically did a retreat, and she met with all of the attorneys, or she met with the leadership prior, or she proposed meeting with the leadership prior, understanding what they were looking for, and then facilitating a week or a weekend retreat, working through the strategic planning portion of the EOS. And then that was the good strategy. The better strategy is where she did that session with them, but then she also worked with the practice group leaders on a quarterly basis, and she worked with the managing partner on a monthly basis to support during the rollout of that strategic plan. And then the best was where she supported the internal managers, and she basically functioned as an external COO. So she did 5 interviews, and after those 5 interviews, she went back to 4 with these options. And then based on the conversations that came out of those options, she then actually sold a little over $80,000 in consulting services. So 3 different levels. So one of the things that you want to think through as you think of your fractional offering, that's probably going to fit somewhere between here and here. So between the better and the best is where your fractional services are going to fit in. Or maybe the fractional services are right up here, and the external support that you may be able to bring with additional resources may fit into the best. So that's what I want you to be thinking through as we talk about this, because here's what you're probably going to bump up against. A lot of these companies have hired people to do this for them in the past, and maybe it was a bad experience. And what is really important for you to do is understand, why did it not work? Because in some cases, it may be the leader that you were working with had unrealistic expectations. Maybe they were trying to hire you on a fractional basis to do the work that would require a full-time employee. There are any number of things that can come up as hiccups. And what's really important that you do is that you look for the obstacles first. So one of my rules that I like to have folks just keep in the back of your mind is, if you leave a meeting feeling good, it means you probably didn't ask all of the questions that you should have, because there are always obstacles that are going to get in the way of your deal happening. And it's really important that you look for and uncover those obstacles, and then talk through how you're going to address them. And also, this will also help you manage that scope creep that can often happen as you move into getting paid for your services. Okay, so now I'm going to take just a second here before we dive into pricing and ask, do we have any questions around the options that we've talked about, creating a good, better, and best. Anybody have any questions? Chris, do you want to add anything?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I know I'm going kind of fast. And just remember that you're going to have the slide deck to help you kind of think through some of these things, because there is a lot to this that you are going to have to answer and put together just the planning behind it. Because what's important when you think about the structure for your services, how you're going to get paid, and what the scope of work needs to look like, is you need to be able to look at the issue and think through how long is it going to take to solve it. And then you think through what your desired hourly rate would be. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. So let's say you are a CFO that would typically sell your services for $150,000. And you may be a CFO that is a senior level CFO. So perhaps you've worked with organizations that are at the height of the mid-market or Fortune 500. So if you're thinking about at that level, you're worth a greater sum based on your experience and what you've seen in the past. So it's important for you to think through what you're going to provide them access to and back into what your hourly rate would be from that. So for example, as a VP of sales, the senior level that someone would typically pay someone with my background and expertise would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of around $250,000 a year. So when I back into that from the 2,000 hours in a year, that's where I'm going to come up with what my hourly rate should be for consulting services. The other thing that I'm also wanting to think through is what other admin support services can be utilized to serve this client. So for example, the less I can have my time be a part of some of these projects, the better. Because one of the big questions that you're going to have to ask and answer is, how are you going to scale? Because ideally, what I'd like for you to think about is, how can you move from just selling your time for money to where you actually have programs or products that you can sell that allow you to make money while you sleep. So that's what I want you thinking through when we're talking about these pricing considerations. And then the impact is going to play into this as well. So for example, the attorney that I gave you the example of before, the hourly commitment, it would typically take him, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of around, it was $1,500 worth of time. And his desired hourly rate that he wanted to make was $250 an hour. So that was factored in. And then he also factored in having a paralegal that supported a lot of the document gathering and administrative communication with the client, so that again, he wasn't tied directly to it. And then it moved to where he was able to bring in other attorneys to do the bulk of the contract services. And that left him room based on that understanding impact. That's your profit margin. And he had the opportunity to make the profit margin based on the fact that by spending $15,000 to $25,000, it would give them access to potentially millions in funding. So they were thinking about it from that ROI perspective as well. Okay, so let's take just a really quick minute here and see if you have any questions about pricing. Because this is kind of a big topic that normally comes up with a, okay, I haven't quite figured out how to get paid what I'm worth. Anybody here ever dealt with that?
Well, I think, as my experience is, I think people have a tendency to want the work, and so they want to be discounting their prices, and I'm here to tell you that's a recipe for disaster. It's working hourly and working discounted is not a recipe for success. You took a lot of time in your life to get educated and to get to build your experience and stuff, so it's worth a reasonable cost, right?
So one of the things that I want to also talk about, because it did just come up that sometimes there are some significant objections about the cost of having a professional serve them during this process. If you end up with sticker shock at what it's costing you, then I'm going to suggest you go back to the conversation with the prospect about what they're trying to accomplish. Because when you quantify the value of what you can do for them and you quantify it through their own experiences, for example, let's say that they're having a hard time with a particular operation in their business that you can replace with a technology solution. And that technology solution is going to cost them $150,000. Well, $150,000 isn't that big of a spend if you help them recognize that it's costing them millions to not have that. And that's the part, if you get sticker shock, then you need to go back and look at how well did you actually help them quantify and recognize the transformation benefit of having you. Because normally when we get to this point and we're having these conversations, and that's something else, I don't want anything to be a surprise. So when you think about the different options, so when we have I'm going to scoot back here just one slide. So when you think about the good, better, best, I want you to have the conversation with the prospect about what each of these could potentially cost. So for example, the strategy session, the attorney that I gave you the example of in Denver, she sold it for $2,500 a day. So it was $5,000 for the strategy. And then the better, with the ongoing, the quarterly check-ins, which were basically half-day retreats internally, she sold those at $1,500 for a half day. So that was another $6,000 for the year. But then she sold it at $1,000 a month with the practice group leader for the ongoing support to just keep them on track. And then the external, that was where she sold her time for $10,000 per month. So she ended up engaging one at every level. But in the initial conversations, when she went back for that second meeting and did brainstorming with them and talked through these issues, she was very careful to have the conversation that said, if I start helping you at this level, you're going to be prepared to spend about $5,000. And then the better was when she discussed it's 5,000 plus, you're probably looking at about $20,000 or $30,000 for the year. So would you invest $20,000 to $30,000 to get the outcome you're looking for? So everything had been discussed early on with pricing, so there were no surprises. So that's one of the things that's also really important for you to have the conversations early about. Working with you on a fractional basis isn't always cheaper than hiring a full-time employee. Sometimes it may be more expensive, but if it gives them access to getting something done that they haven't had, what hasn't worked in the past, that's the other reason it's important for you to ask that question. The more you brainstorm through that and help them recognize why you and why it makes sense to pay you potentially even more, that's the information that will really help you with selling your fractional services and engaging with this client. So I want to make sure that I get us wrapped up in a timely manner. So I'm going to go through these next few slides and then I'm going to open it up for questions again. So what is also important is that you define your scope of work. And what I shared with you, and when I first started talking about how you're going to get this slide deck, you can actually use this as a template to create your own scope of work, because it's important that you start with and you really define what that reality is. What are they trying to move away from? What have they done that hasn't worked? Then you want to talk about the benefits of what they're moving to. What could their life look like when they have those functions in place and everything working well? What will the different phases of services look like? So think about that good, better, best. Maybe that is a transition. Maybe you engage at the good level, and then as they get started and they recognize that they need more help to accomplish what they come out of the strategy with, then you move to phase two, which is the better. And then the best is where you bring that staff augmentation or external resource or fractional support to keep them on track. What's really important, though, is that in that scope of work, you do define this is what we have factored in when we discover. So, for example, you are always going to discover issues. It's that can of worms, or this is where you discover the dust bunnies under the bed. And maybe in your initial fact finding, there are a few monsters that are hiding behind the dust bunnies. You want to make sure that you talk through your scope of services is up to this. And then if you discover additional issues that are there, this is what it looks like. And you will have a conversation with them to talk through what that outside of scope work will cost them to address, or help them come up with external resources to address that issue. Don't leave them hanging, and don't leave any open spots when you're thinking through your scope of work. You don't just want to sell fractional services as I'm going to work for you half day a week for 4 weeks, because that really doesn't talk through that potential impact. That's one of the things that you miss, and where you end up selling your time for money instead of selling a transformation, where when you sell the transformation, that's where you can make more money in terms of the how you get paid. And then also you're going to include the pricing. The thing that you also want to talk through and be flexible about is payment options right now, because everybody is struggling to figure out how they're going to manage cash flow. And the more you can think through being flexible with that. So for example, I used to get paid for the bulk of my consulting engagements up front. I'd get paid typically 30 to 50%, depending on the work that I was doing. Well, one of the things that I discovered is that when I phased it out over, if it was a 6-month project and I had monthly payments over that 6-month timeline, it made it a lot more easy for that smaller business to bite it off and get started with it. So, but then you do also want to make sure that your scope of work makes it very clear that if they exit the arrangement at any point in time, what the accelerated payment structure needs to look like. And there's some of this, mine's pretty simple because my work has a tendency to be fairly, there's a horizon on it as far as a moment in time. So I'm very careful to talk about so for instance, if I'm working with a client and I'm recruiting for them, I'm typically paid in 3 major buckets that are chunks of work. And if they opt to exit at any moment during halfway through one of those 3 significant spots, then what that fee structure looks like that they're going to owe for and how I arrive at that. Okay, and it looks like I've got a really, yes, and another point that I want to make sure that we do make is that scope of work is in writing. Okay, this is outlined. There's a spot where they sign off. There's it doesn't necessarily have to be witnessed and notarized and all that other stuff, but I want there to be that very clear understanding that you go through with them. And you also discuss the timeline. of how everything is going to roll out and what that's going to look like. Now what? Okay, any questions before we dive into your homework? Because we got some pretty big homework from this. And some of this may be kind of overwhelming, because what I have given you is you are now at a crossroads, and you have the opportunity right here to decide whether or not you want to function as an employee, which is where you get paid a paycheck for performing a service, or whether or not you want to truly be that change agent that is hired and you're selling a transformation. And if you're selling that transformation, it needs to be bigger than just your time. And that's where you start to think of how you're going to structure your service offering. So as you're thinking through what that might look like, this is where you can make the decision of, are you going to have a job working in your business, or are you going to grow a business where other people do the work? Potentially you sell the work and then you transition it off to others. And some of the ways that you can think of how you transition that work, because if you're like me, I have worked with a lot of different partners and employees, and what I typically find is that I am not the best boss in the world. So I collaborate really well with others. And similar to the partnership that Chris and I have on this, he has his own business, I have my own business, and we have a joint venture that we are partnering on and collaborating with. So that's an example of a referral partner and how I'm scaling. And Chris is helping me with that scaling effort. I may also bring in channel partners for different projects. So for example, if I have a client that we are recruiting and adding to their team, there are different resources that I bring in to address issues. So some of the issues I may bring in one of my partners that does market research and understands and evaluates target market segments and quantifies what that is, so that we've got some facts and figures and not just warm fuzzy around it before they go all in to pursuing that. I also may need to bring in someone to help create compensation structures that make sense. So those fit under that channel partner. They work under me. The other thing also is be aware that there are a lot of ways you can engage a virtual assistant that can do a lot of your admin support, everything from managing your calendar to responding to email to my VA handles anything that we put on the website. She handles my email communications and all the programming on that. So all of the administrative stuff, I have an external admin that supports that. And sometimes that admin may be 20 or 30 hours a week or more. Mine works with, I'm typically using her for less than 10 hours a month. So that's what you have to think about, is just ways that you can do more with your knowledge that doesn't involve your direct time investment. Okay, so I've covered a whole lot of ground. Chris, do you want to add anything to this before we dive into their homework?
No, it's the only thing I'm thinking is the conversation that you and I have constantly. Is I've had, done SWOT analysis and all these business things, and and everybody's like, to the uneducated person, it's like, oh, let's get hourly and let's just stay busy. And I highly recommend what we're saying is it needs to be value based, right? And not to be callous about it, but I like to make money when I'm asleep. You know what I mean? So.
And that's something that you have to think about as you're moving forward and thinking about how you scale your services. And the reason I'm making you think about this now is because it's much like if you're going to build a house. If you're going to build a foundation for a 3-story house, it's going to look a little bit different than a foundation for a 1-story ranch dwelling. And it's important that you think through this about what you want to build, because that determines a lot of how you're and what relationships you may need to support you as you are building your fractional service business or as you're expanding. So for you to take action and move forward, your homework is I want you to, first of all, just spend the weekend with a journal and jot down and think about some of those first questions that I ask you about who you want to serve. Where have you had the most impact? Where have you been the most fulfilled and excited about the work that you're doing? And then identify leaders or organizations that look like those former opportunities that you had. And then as you're talking with them, I want you to be brainstorming through what those solutions look like. Now, the getting to revenue, this part, I hope you're all paying attention. So if you're surfing social media, stop, because this part is so important. Because if you don't get someone that is prepared to write you a check for whatever option you come up with, you have not adequately researched the viability of that as a service offering. Are you with me? Because the biggest mistake that I see people make is they have a lot of these wonderful meetings with business owners about, hey, do you think this would be helpful to businesses? And we live in the world of Midwest nice. People don't want to tell you your baby's ugly and that you're dressing him funny. They really don't. They only want to tell you, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. It's not a great idea unless they're prepared to write you a check for it. Okay? So that is the hard reality of selling fractional services. So you have to brainstorm solutions and talk through, would this make sense for you in your organization? And then if the answer is yes, then your next question should be, so what would you like to do? Would you like for me to help you with this? And if so, this is what is involved. Now, understand, I have sold cars and the hard close does not work. Okay? It never did when I sold cars. They told me all day long that I was supposed to ask the question, if I can get the facts and figures to your satisfaction, will you buy and drive today? And I never said it. The only time that I have ever used that exact language is in a training session where I talk about how a hard close doesn't work. Okay. So what works is a collaborative effort where you are a part of that solution and you support them on their buyer journey. And they see you as a highly influential and engaged partner to help them get where they want to go. You get to that point and you ask the question of, so what would you like to do now? And they're probably going to be busting out their checkbook saying, how soon can you start? Okay. But now this is not, understand what your process may have been up to this point may have been one meeting, one conversation. And that is not the process that's going to sell fractional services. So hopefully you've understood today that this is a process. It is multi-steps. You do have to support and provide a lot of value, and that there are a lot of ways that you can provide that value that is independent of you delivering your knowledge one-to-one. This is where content plays in. This is where you think about that good, better, best. There are so many ways that you can structure that good, where you can serve many at one time instead of just one-to-one. And then as you think through this, you want to lather, rinse, and repeat as you move forward with these services. So what I want to encourage you to do now at this point is recognize that I have given you enough that your head may be exploding. You may be thinking about, okay, this is wonderful, Brendan. Chris, how am I going to get this done? How am I going to do this? So what I'm going to tell you is that we are here to support you at whatever level you want to be supported. So my good is free. You can sit in on these webinars on a weekly basis, and I'm always going to be delighted to have you. You can join our Facebook group where we have conversations there and engage. I'm going to ask that you engage your community. If you found value in today's conversation, please share this webinar with others. Share the recording of today's session. Discuss where you may be able to collaborate. When I'm talking about engaging that community, there can be a tribe of you that are all working to serve your best prospects. And the more you create that tribe, the more fun this can be. I mean, it's not fun to be doing business out of your home office and I mean, that's, I think, one of the things that we've all become very, very aware of is that we like to have that interaction, and collaboration can get you so excited, and being challenged by other very smart people and being exposed to other problems, and it's exciting. So engage your community. Recognize if you have a gap in your community, um, if there are professionals that you continually stumble across issues in your clients and you don't have a resource, reach out. I am happy to connect you to some amazing professionals. My community has about 400 to 500 professionals that I know their service. I know their product. I'm aware. I get to be like the Angie's List of professionals. People call me and tell me this person did an amazing job. Or I also hear the other side of it, which is if you refer them to someone that looks like this in the future, just be aware that this is how they've addressed it with this particular client. I'm always happy to introduce you to amazing people. And then if you recognize that this prospecting journey is one that you would like to have not only normally it's a case of people may be happy scheduling their own vacation. If you've recognized that you want a travel agent on your own journey to success, and you want someone that's going to support you during that entire journey, Chris and I are here to help you with that. And we've got some tools that you can add to your prospecting. One of those is we offer a membership to a 12-month long program. And that 12-month long program supports you throughout an entire year of creating your marketing effort. And I don't want you to think that what we're talking about is a one and done, because so much of this is you're going to have some success as you get started, but then you're also going to stub your toe and you're going to stumble, and you're going to come into parts of this journey that are really uncomfortable. And when it gets uncomfortable, it gets kind of scary. And we've been here to support a lot of professionals through that. And Chris and I are collaborating on a program right now that we can help you and show you how to create that good level of service. So we'll actually teach you how to create a program or product that you can deliver either to your prospects, or potentially you can offer it to your clients and sell it and create an additional revenue stream. And this will be designed as a digital workshop or digital course. So, and we're going to walk you through how you create that based on transferring your knowledge and expertise into a delivery that is consumable for those different target audiences that we've talked about today. So our beta group is kicking off next week. The Brand You program we are giving as a bonus offer to anyone who signs up for the Productive Prospecting Forum that is kicking off. So I'm going to encourage you, if you want to join, you can pop in. Chris, could you chat do you have the link handy that you could chat to the group?
My chat only goes to you.
Oh, well.
I mean, that's it right there. So.
Okay, I'm gonna have it right here. I am going to share this real quick in the chat, and you can hop in, and just when you hop in on this, it will actually, that comes to me. So it'll send me a message and I can answer any questions that you would have about the program and help you figure out whether or not that's the next right step for you to take in creating your consulting services. Now, we have covered so much ground today. Again, you're going to get the recording for today. You're going to get the slide deck. And then also you will have my contact info so you can reach out and ask me any questions. And we've got a lot that we've covered today, and it's probably created more questions than answers. Know that in the coming weeks, we're going to be meeting here every week, same time, same channel. And when we get back together, I'm going to be introducing you to professionals that I walk you through how they have done this. So I'm going to introduce you to some folks, everyone, you're going to have attorneys. I'm going to feature accountants. I'm going to feature folks that are selling other consulting services so that you hear how they did it. And these are all people that did not come from a sales background. And where every one of our sessions that we deliver is designed to be not only here's what you might think about, but here's how you would do it. So everything that I'm always going to give you, my goal is for you to take it and make money at whatever level you want to engage. So I want to say thank you so much for investing your time. And I did run over. I'm going to have to start telling everybody that this is an hour and a half. But hopefully you've gotten some great insight out of today that you are going to take and apply in your own business. And we just want to say thank you for your participation and your support, because making an impact in your lives is why we are here. We are about serving people at a time when they need help. And we recognize that there are areas that you may be struggling in your business, and we are here to serve as a resource for that. I'm going to leave you with one thought. Remember, to get what you want, you must help others get what they want. I'm going to wish you a great day and good selling, everybody. Bye now.